It is.
What is up, you lovely listener? Welcome to another episode of Oversharing. As always, I am super pumped for today's episode, but for this one in particular, because our guest today reminds us that we are better leaders when our needs are met. She's on a mission to bridge the gap of awareness and practicality in corporate America, one business at a time, and she's the host of Your Sacred Pattern podcast. But before I speak too much, I want to let Tsai overshare. How you doing, Ellen?
Hey, I'm so good. And what a intro. I loved it.
Well, you made it easy. Your website is great. Your online presence, the whole thing is really awesome. I've truly enjoyed following you over the last, it's only been a couple of weeks, but sometimes like you come across certain pages or certain people and you're like, I want to know them. And so that's kind of this scenario. I'd love to know you. And starting with what you were like in high school.
What I was like in high school. I love vulnerability and transparency. And I think that us being in our human experience and leading in that way gives other people permission to lead in that way. So I will say that high school was rough. It was a little rough for me. I came from a private school where there was only 8 kids in a graduating class. It felt like homeschool. And then I went to this big all girls Catholic high school, which I was not even Catholic. And it really was just a journey of figuring out how to belong and witnessing how deeply I wanted to belong. I did have a core group of girlfriends and they were a lot of fun. And I also explored a lot with just hanging out with public school kids, which was great. But for me, high school was a little wonky, a little just trying to figure out my flow.
Well, with a graduating class of eight people, you said?
In 8th grade. Yeah.
Oh, in 8th grade. I see. So, I mean, coming from like a smaller situation, like I can imagine where it's a little bit challenging to navigate, maybe finding your tribe could have been a little challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, it was because in Catholic high schools, I didn't realize this, but they all come from Catholic feeder schools, which means they go K through 8th with each other. They go on with each other. And so there was already really strong bonds and they were based on which school you came from, which made sense. I was probably one of 2 people who are not Catholic and did not come from a Catholic school. So it just made it a little bit more challenging to find my tribe and to find my group. But all of those life lessons really built into where I'm at now and the lessons that I have about what it means to attract your tribe and what it means to be in an environment and to be different. Yeah, it's funny looking back and just realizing that everything is contributing to this life experience and all the life lessons that we're meant to come on and learn and then also share.
Who were your best friends in high school and what did you guys do for fun?
My best girlfriend, her name was Samantha Eaton, and we were on the cheer team. I just laugh thinking about it because we were on the cheer team together. I don't think either of us were really that great. But she was my best girlfriend. She was my ride or die. She was also just down to romp around the city and get into trouble. And we went to parties a lot. We just had a fun time. She was my saving grace. She was the one that whenever I felt like a black sheep, she was like, you're my girl. And so we just stuck together. We wrote it out.
Yeah. I mean, you always have that one, which is great. Do you guys still keep in contact?
Yes. I talk to her all the time.
Oh, that's amazing. I love those stories, having old friends like that. I mean, I'm sure when you got out of high school or when you were in there, you weren't thinking like, hey, you know what? I want to be a business consultant. I want to be a mentor. Tell me about the transition into your career.
Yeah, rad question. I love that question. It started off with a corporate journey. And so part of my mission is to support heart-centered leaders in whatever they need. I primarily focus on energy, time, process, but really I want all the people who are value-driven, purpose-driven entrepreneurs to just come up online and step in. I almost cussed.
Yeah.
That journey looked like being in corporate and coming into situations that I knew deep down were authentic with my truth. And I believe that when you live a life of truth, you are living in your authenticity. And that's what creates an easier life because you're just honest. And I was coming up against my values over and over and over again. And so after 9 years, I realized that what would the journey look like if I went out on my own? So I went out on my own as a process consultant. Actually, funny enough, I work with marketing agencies and marketing teams. So I do business consulting on the side. all around operations and process. And then I started getting really into doing this exercise I call mind mapping with people, which is where we sit one-on-one and we create mind maps, but from a place of bringing in intuition, asking intuitive questions, and being able to navigate some of the roadblocks that they're feeling. And then that kind of led step by step into full-on mentorship and helping people organize their life. I like to say that I just come in and Marie Kondo their life, just clean it all up.
I feel like I need a little bit of that. Maybe that's what it was. It's like I was somehow led to your profile because somebody needed to Marie Kondo my life. But I love the idea of being aware enough of your own values to the point where you can identify where the organization that you were in wasn't aligning with those. Can you talk a little bit more specifically about that? Like, what was the friction there?
Yeah. So I talk about it all on my latest episode. How to know when it's time to leave corporate. But yeah, I guess high level, it came down to the factory line formation and watching people follow suit just to follow suit and say yes when they really never took the time to ask any questions. I actually left 3 years at a job that I loved. They were a great combination of corporate and family, and yet still out of everything, it really was divine alignment. God was calling me to entrepreneurship. And so sometimes the way that God calls me off one timeline and onto another timeline is through a pattern that is connected to my wound. So a pattern that's connected to my wound was being overrun by a female leader who has seniority to me and whose weapon of choice is passive aggressive behavior. Of course, all of that is my work to do, but I go where God takes me. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Yeah. Cause I knew that was my time to exit and leave.
Yeah, definitely. And I apologize. It's called oversharing. And so I end up prying a little bit, but you mentioned that, part of your wound was female authority that who had a way of lashing out via passive aggressiveness. This sounds like it showed up previously in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, quite a bit. I think it's great that you identified that and then had the courage to kind of like step out and be like, look, I'm going to leave this security, this job I love, like those types of things, and take a bet on myself. Of course, divine timing. And when you feel like you're being called to do so, I was going to say it makes it easier, but actually it doesn't always make it easier. I feel like there's a lot of contesting with God in that spot. But what gave you the courage to finally make that jump?
Well, one would be the practical example, which was it really was truly kind of like God delivering this into my hands. It was way easier. I had about a client, some of the problems they were having about their creative team taking, over 2 weeks to get something back, feeling like nobody had any organization, their project management system wasn't being utilized. And I was like, oh my God, that's my specialty. I do that. And he's like, great, come on. And I was like, all right, well, they're a European company. Would you be open to doing part-time? Started working 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. my full-time job. And then at night, I was just so like on the idea that I could really do this, that I used the nights to build out my business. And as you can imagine, burnout happened quickly ensued after that, because that's not sustainable. But part of what helped me to do that is going in and putting in the extra hours to see what I was capable of. So that would be the practical response. The other one I will say is realizing that leaving your corporate job is one of the biggest glass cages that you're ever going to blast through, because it breaks through any programming, any ideation that you have or that you were raised with, that we cannot feel safe unless we are in that typical 9 to 5. And for a lot of people, I wouldn't suggest entrepreneurship to everybody. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of inner work, a lot of stepping into your fears and blasting through scarcity mindset, all of that jazz. But actually having the courage to do it, I think that I was just at my end and I could feel myself be like, do it, do it, do it. And my lizard brain was like, no, we're scared. And so you just have to rip the Band-Aid. So I ripped the Band-Aid.
What was that first year like for you?
A lot of inner work.
Mm.
A lot of inner work. So part of being a heart-centered leader is building your life, designing your life around the idea that there's room for the inner work and the work to actually practically set up your business, especially if you're going to be a heart-centered leader, because in heart-centered leadership, there is a lot of meeting your own shadows so that you can show people through your leadership. And it may not be direct coaching, but it could just be, if you're the manager of a company or the CEO, and just being able to lead by ethics and values. And that's going to have to blast through some of the egotistical programming that has gotten us to where we were then. So yeah, setting up environments to do the inner work. I did a lot of inner work, and it was a beautiful journey, and I don't think that it's over.
It like
but
never is. We get a little progress and something smacks us in the face again, right?
yeah, right. But it's been an incredible journey. I love being an entrepreneur. It's a little rough, but you know what? The amount of freedom and creative expression, the type of people you meet, the flexibility that you have, the autonomy to design your life however you want it. Um, yeah, it's pretty badass.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of an interesting thing. Excuse me. Wow, it's kind of an interesting thing because I I almost recommend that everybody try it at least once in a weird way. And I would love if like, I hope my team doesn't listen to this, but I would love if my team tried it. I love them so much. Like we work so well together, but it's like, if they were like, I want to start my own thing, and be like, let me know how I can support you. And I think that's really, I think that's, I don't know, it is a life-changing experience, but I love this idea of like heart-centered leadership. Like this is so big, I think that there's the death of like the hustle era is kind of the death of the hustle era is upon us, I want to say. And maybe it happened a while ago, definitely maybe during during quarantine, not really the pandemic or whatever, but during quarantine and stuff like that, right? But I'm curious to know, because it sounds like you started a while back, and you also have that hustle in you where you're working like, your corporate job, then working at night, then building a runway, or whatever that process looked like for you. Like it sounds as if the hustle of everything isn't really what you're about, but rather looking in. Where did you see that the hustle was burning you out, and how did you kind of like, I don't know, how did you identify that, and what was that first step that you took to like make the change into being a little bit more mindful about how you were leading your business? That was really
Yeah.
long-winded.
No, that's a great question and such a great reflection. I would say it's a couple things. One is massive self-awareness to understand what works for you and what doesn't. And the second would be always build your container before you rely on your flow. Okay. So what that means is that if we have set systems in our life that we can automate and we can rely on, that's when sustainable flow happens. But so often people are like, I'm just going to flow with it. And it's like, right on, like, that's awesome. Flow with it. But like, where are you going? Like, where are you going? This way? Are you going this way? Like, what direction are you going? So that's another thing that leads to burnout, is that people are working and they don't know if it's aligned with their values because they don't have self-awareness. They don't know what direction they're going because they haven't pre-thought about that in advance. So building up those systems and having the self-awareness to know how your body operates. So in my Work Life Soul program, we do a lot of different audits and assessments, but essentially we look at how are your human energy systems how are your human energy systems designed? Because God created us all differently. So first we explore how your systems are designed, and then we build your life and your business around what works for you. So one example might be, there may be an hour of your day that you are most energized, most focused, most social, less energized, ready for bed, and everybody's different. So if you can hone in on, hey, these are my hours where I'm the most creative and I'm the most focused, so I don't take calls during those. That's my boundary. And it all comes down to, that's like one small example of how do you set boundaries in your own life? Well, in order to set boundaries, you have to know yourself really well. That's the only way that it's fair. So once you know yourself and you know what your needs are, then you can set boundaries. And it's those boundaries that keep you from hitting burnout.
Wow. How do we, I'm like thinking about that for myself. I'm like, damn it. Like, I always want to like, I used to have time blocks in my calendar, like no meetings because I'm going to work on myself. Do I book meetings during those times? Absolutely, every day. Finally, I was like, okay, so this isn't sustainable for me. It became a little challenging, and maybe I wasn't disciplined enough to do that. But what I'm really curious about is, how can a heart-centered leader maybe empower his or her team, their team rather, to understand their own energy so that they can like design their day. That's kind of something that I believe in, but I found a little friction there, because it's like, okay, well, we have like operating hours, and our clients have operating hours that we need to, and deadlines and so on and so forth, and our day flows in a certain way. What are some ways that we might be able to empower our teams to do something like that?
This one is a little bit tricky because you also have to have times where it's not, they're going to have to build the discipline to also work around what's best for the energy of the business itself. And so the business operates at certain times. You can create boundaries. Like if you did a survey of all of your team members and you surveyed, when their hours were the best, when they would like to have focus times, and you took the average out and then you blocked out those times. Like let's say, Fridays were a no meeting day. That would be one small way that people can be heads down and work on what they're doing. It helps when everybody's in the office. I think there's a lot of people working from home, which makes things a little bit tricky because when you're working from home, it's easy to get distracted and you're not working as an organism towards something. Yeah, because like if I'm home, let's say I have a family, I want to work with that organism, but it's like, but I'm on the office hours. So another thing I will say is just setting really clear goals of what they need to accomplish and what the standards are of the company. And if they meet those goals, they meet those goals.
Yeah. Maybe not being so micromanagey about like the time that they're in, and more so it's like, just make sure you make this meeting and this deadline, and however you get there is up to you. I like that.
Yeah.
I've tried different styles of that, some successful, some very unsuccessful. But I love what you're talking about with, like, if you're in office, it's easier to work toward a common goal because you're working within that organism, right? And I found this out the hard way. Half of our team last year was remote, and there's like too much like disconnect. I think that there's a certain IP that's transferred via osmosis when you're together, even if you're not talking that much. Right. So how can we start to like, when we're working in our offices together, how can do we have to be like respectful of other people's energies a lot? I know that's kind of like a slam dunk question there. It's like, yes, but I think that's something I struggle with. It's like, oh, I know that teammate X doesn't like this and this and that, but man, I really got to get this thing done. Like, and I need their help on it. Like, how would I navigate a situation like that?
So that one would probably have to be specific to what teammate X is actually working on. But a couple things that come to mind is one, understanding your team's motivators. There's 9 different types of motivations for a team and they can range. So having them really understanding what their motivations are. Sometimes you have to go like father knows best type of thing and really just what is best for the business. Like you want to always respect your team members and of course make sure that they have autonomy and sovereignty, but you also are all together working on a mission. So it's not just about one person if they are feeling a certain type of way about something. It's about what's going to benefit the organism as a whole and not necessarily the organism in the sense of like what's going to make us the most money. I don't work on those terms, but it's like what is going to get y'all to the goal that you're all trying as a team to work towards. Other ways that could be helpful is if it's somebody who genuinely performs better when they're in control, you can have them fully own whatever the project is. So when they know that they have full autonomy and they just have to get to the goal and they can decide how to do it, sometimes they perform better. So it's just about kind of learning your team and how they work.
Definitely. And I want to acknowledge the fact and affirm that I know that there are businesses and entrepreneurs that hire you to consult to do these types of things. And you've given us a lot of valuable information already. So I want to take a step back, a little less tactical and specific, because, you know, can't give away the farm, obviously. But you're so generous. And I know that you would answer any other questions. So thank you for that. But stepping back just a little bit, when it comes to heart-centered leadership, and, you know, I believe you work with organizations up to 30 people. What is the biggest disconnect that you see amongst your clients that you've been able to help them with, or like individual disconnect? That question makes sense. Or the most common disconnect. Aha.
Right.
I found words.
Right. The most common disconnect. Okay. Well, first, just in case anybody in the audience is confused, I do have two separate businesses. So one of them is coaching, where I work one-on-one with entrepreneurs, and one of them is consulting, where I go into marketing teams. So for teams themselves, one of the most common disconnects I see, because my whole focus is about how can we get the energy flowing through your business without all this resistance? Because with our logical thinking mind, we make things harder than it needs to be. And in businesses, you will have one person on the social media team, one person on the copywriting team, one person who's doing creative direction, and they all have their own way of doing things. And so they're like, well, this works for me, so let's do it this way. And this works for me, so let's do it this way. But if you don't have somebody who's coming up 1,000-foot view and seeing things from a general holistic place that works for everyone without being process specific to one person, then you can implement a technology where the entire team can do a little bit of training to get onto it. And then they're then flowing with the system. So to say that in a simplified couple of words, it's that people are building process as they go without having a background in process. So it always helps to have somebody come in and be like, whoa, 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 everybody stop for a second. This is all a little chaotic. Like, let's bring it up. Let's clean some things out. Let's anything that's not serving us, let's ditch that process and let's implement something that's really going to work, so that you guys aren't redoing your work. That's what I see a lot of, is redoing work, stepping over each other's toes, not knowing when deadlines are. Actually, that would be another one that's super fun. This one's really small, but it'd be amazing how many things don't get done because you'll be like, hey, would you mind copying this paper for me? It's like, yeah, sure. 1 week goes by, 2 week goes by. It's like, hello, you know, and then you take an extra 5 minutes out of your day to be like, hey, by the way, you know, those 5 minutes, every time you take it to do something admin that is not necessary, it adds up. It adds up and it burns people out, because now they're not in their zone of genius. They didn't come to be a project manager. They came to be a social media manager. So the one way to fix that is to be like, hey, can you copy this paper by tomorrow at noon? Because I have this presentation that I want to do. And, you know, let me know if you need any support if you don't have the resources to do that, period.
Oof. What do you need done? I will do it for you. Like,
Yeah.
Can we just, I need to pause for a second because I think it's so effective. It's like, it's not just like by noon. It's like, because XYZ. And by the way, if you don't have the resources, let me know how I can support. Like, like, I don't even know what to say, because I'm like, that's actually my biggest problem, is that I go the opposite route. Not intentionally, but I won't say the deadline, because for two reasons. One, I don't want to come off like, but at the same time, sorry, to the listener, that was, I don't want to come off as if I'm being like bossy and whatever by saying, can you get this done for me tomorrow by noon? However, that clarity would save everybody a lot of stress. So to mitigate that, here's the reason why. I'm not just giving you busy work for the sake of busy work, but this is going to impact our business. And if you need additional help, please let me know. Like, then now I'm not the jerk. Now I'm just the person that needs your support.
Right. Yeah. And they have your support. They don't feel like they're in it on their own.
You might have just changed my business overnight just with that.
What I'm here for.
Yeah, no, I love that. You know, again, thank you for clarifying that there's two different types of the business. I got so excited about all of it that I forgot to clarify that as well. To your business, rather, the consulting that you do for organizations and the consulting that you do on an individual basis. And I love that you do that, because entrepreneurship shows up in different ways. You don't necessarily need 30 employees or, 20 team or whatever the case may be to be an entrepreneur. Sometimes you have to do that on your own. And even though you might not have those things around you, there's a lot of clutter that's being built up. From an individual basis, with maybe the solopreneur, the consultants that you might be working with, what's the most common clutter in those scenarios that you've seen that you've, helped clean up?
Oh, this one is juicy because it's fresh. It just landed, I think, in the last couple of days. So I've been specifically doing the work-life soul balance program for female entrepreneurs. That's been something I've been doing for several months, just because I feel like I can relate a little bit to how the female brain works. And then we design something around that. But this one, so a common thing that I hear is, I don't know how to say no. I keep just saying yes. And
Mm,
I'm overloaded with all of these things that I need to do. And I realize that what's at the core of that is people pleasing, is this idea of wanting to serve others before we serve ourselves. And the way that you mitigate that is that you have a reason to serve yourself first. So you create the discipline, you create the time block if you need to say, hey, this is my time to serve me. And then you don't feel like you're lying. Like, people pleasers do not like to lie. So if somebody's like, hey, do you want to go to this dinner? And on the spot, you're like, no, I don't want to. Like, I don't really like you that much. Nobody's going to say that, right? So they end up saying yes. And when you say yes to things that you know in your heart are truly no, they're not in alignment, they're not creating value, and you just don't have the capacity to do it, you're actually turning your back on yourself. And when you turn your
mm,
back on yourself, it's an invisible cloak of, you lose a point in motivation, you lose a point in self-esteem, and you lose a point in having confidence with yourself. Because if you can't trust yourself, how are you going to trust somebody else? And so that would be the number one thing, is one, understanding your boundaries, being able to set commitments with yourself and honor those as more important, because we want to be able to fill our cup before we fill other people's cups. And the other thing, this one's again going to be practical. So if anybody doesn't know, my whole approach is practical, spiritual approach to everything, because life and balance. So the practical is having a project management system or something set up where you know what needs to get done every day, every week, every month. And so it's on auto drive, which means you have commitments to make because you've already planned out. And then that goes back to knowing what needs to get done, getting it done, being able to know truly how much time you have for social interactions, etc. That was long.
no, but that's so good, right? And man, again, uh, maybe I'm typical, or maybe you're speaking right to my soul, but it's like, saying no is the hardest thing to do, even to projects, right? Like, people, I think this is a big one I'd love to cover, and I may be asking on behalf of somebody very close to me, is like, I believe that there might be a correlation between, I mean, there is a correlation between saying no and a scarcity mindset. Like, this is the last inquiry I'm ever going to get. If I don't say yes to this, then not going to, I'm not going to be able to get any more business, like that type of thing. Right. So how have you, what are some strategies that somebody might be able to, maybe not even strategies, but mindsets that somebody might be able to adopt to kind of get over their scarcity mindset and feel confident in saying no more often?
I would say, one, getting very clear on what a hell yeah is, so that you know right off the bat what is a no, and then taking some dedicated time to understand what the consequences of taking that business on will do. Like, it could deplete your team's energy. It could end up costing you more because they're a difficult customer, whatever that is. And
I think that's a big one, right? It's like, what is the cost of taking this customer on or this client on? And I don't think that enough people think about that. They see a dollar amount and they're like, cool, I'm going to make this much. But
yeah,
where else does it cost me? Does it cost me at home? Does it
yeah.
cost, like those types of things?
Mhm.
Does it cost me, does it? cost me the energy within my organization, those types of things. Those are very important questions to ask
Yeah.
yourself, and nobody asks themselves that enough.
I think it's also about like looking after your team and knowing what's best for your team. There's the spiritual aspect of it too, that when you say no to something that is not value aligned, God provides you with something else, something
Mm.
better. But you have to stay true to your boundaries and you have to stay true to your worth. And yeah, I think that's what kind of opens up the line of flow to bringing in more people that are right for you. Like I've taken on clients that I knew in my heart right off the bat. I mean, my intuition is very strong that this is not going to be the right situation. But the money was there. And
Mm.
so I took the money, but I had to learn the hard way that every single day it was very hard for me to get up and go to work. And I one of the reasons I made your sacred pattern work-life soul balance, it's all about designing a life that works for you, is I know specifically for me, as I'm really sensitive to energy and it needs to be an intuition. It needs to be value aligned. And I have to have the confidence to say no, knowing better things are going to come in. If not, I'm going to be dragging my feet. I don't want to do it. I'll still deliver 100% because that's an integrity with what I offer in my services, but it's going to be a lot harder than I've had other heck yeah clients where they are incredible. I mean, they are loving the idea of transformation and change. They are easy to work with. Everybody on their team is so kind. They're hungry to learn more, etc. So those are the clients that you want to do because those are the ones that are going to reflect back the worth and the value of that service, which is a beautiful validation, not just for you, but for also the team. And when you know you can do a really great job with a client that jives with you, then it's like, you know, you can do it for 10 more clients and 15 more clients and 20 more clients. And so I think that's just, there's this point, this moment in our business where we can keep feeding into the scarcity, which is a short-term gratification, or we can really trust and build into the long-term gratification that's not going to look so pretty for the first couple of months.
Yeah, 100%. I want to change gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about your ethos. I love the idea of work-life soul balance. Work-life balance. I mean, flip on Instagram, and if you follow anybody that has a job, they talk about this or they share a meme. But work-life soul balance isn't something that's talked about enough. And I'd love to hear from where you stand. Like, what does work-life soul balance mean to you?
Yeah. Well, the common term for work-life balance, when I think of that, I think of somebody who's already hit burnout and they're really looking for more time. It just feels like there's not enough hours in the day. And in work-life soul balance, the realization is that there is actually more than enough hours in the day. It's all about how you use those hours and how disciplined you are to protect those hours at all costs. So in work-life soul balance, the soul aspect comes in with the idea that your shadows aren't running the show. So your ego's not running the show. Your ego, your logical brain is making decisions that are not aligned with your heart, and that's draining the energy. So we work on something called a melt system of abundance, which is a long-winded way of basically talking about it's not about money and how much money you can make. It's about money, time, physical energy, which is the motivation, focus, and discipline to get something done, and love, which is self-love, received love, and given love. It's this algorithm I created to help people understand that every time they say yes, what's the formula that's actually going into this? Because it's not just about you spending an hour. If you go to that dinner and you're totally drained for the next 2 days because somebody was not nice to you or something didn't align with you, okay, that's minus 2 days. So incorporating soul is understanding the self-awareness aspect of it, really having that quiet time to be with yourself. When you have quiet time to be with yourself and know yourself, that's actually what's going to boost your energy more than anything else. And that motivation, I like to say your battery, you are the battery of your business. Recharge.
What does quiet time look like for you?
I love learning about myself. My recent is Gene Keys. It's something where you type in your birth information. It would be similar to horoscope. It's got a little bit of human design, but it is spot on. And I love sitting with those because it just confirms some of the obstacles that I'm working with, some of my purpose here. And my little logical mind likes to read it and be like, oh my gosh, it's really about how do you like to spend time with your inner child? Like what lights you
Mm.
up? So the inner time, the time with yourself can be something like meditation. It can be something like breath work. But it's unique to you. So that time with yourself might be like, what was your favorite thing to do as a kid that you still do today? And you just have so much fun doing it.
As a kid, honestly, when I think about that, it was actually being outside and being active. Like I loved playing basketball. I thought I was going to be a professional basketball player. My parents didn't tell me I was going to stop growing at 5'6", but like I loved being outside, physical and active. Yeah.
So how often are you playing basketball?
I play basketball zero, but I am outside often. And I am, I do a lot of like physical work off, like, activities
Yeah.
often. Yeah.
What would it feel like to just join like a pickup team one time and just see like what that feels like?
You know what? Even I had a feeling you were going to ask that next. And I was like, damn, like, even if I suck, I think it would just light me up in a different way. Like the thought of doing it lit me up a little bit. That's interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely something there, right? Because it's like if your logical mind is talking you out of it, but your spirit knows, like as a kid, your spirit knows, right? Like I love to go swimming as a kid. So I know that I'm great when I get into water every so often and just play and have fun and not make it so serious. Like this whole adulting thing. Yeah. I just think that we're just meant to be like a kid forever, but in balance, we're a
Yeah.
kid, we're a boss.
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
yeah, spending time with yourself can look different for everybody, but that would be my key question is go back to something that you did when you were a kid that lit you up and just play with the idea of getting into your kid. And like for you, it might be go 3 or 4 times, even when it starts to feel weird, like push yourself and go 3 or 4 times and see how it feels.
It doesn't seem to me that you're the type of, I mean, you're not, I know this, but, or I guess I shouldn't put you in a box considering I've known you for all of 45 minutes, but it doesn't seem like your pitch at least isn't like let me show you how to make 6 figures in less than 6 months or whatever it is. You're
Mm,
really focused on wealth of the mind, wealth of the soul, which I think is really important.
yeah.
um I don't think that there's anything wrong with making $1 million a year, and I would love to do that personally, you know what I mean? But
Well,
um have you ever come across a situation or a client or things like that, without giving out too much information, obviously, where somebody was so focused on like these, maybe a material goal, that you felt like it might have been pulling from their soul balance and their life balance?
yeah, actually, what a good question. Yeah. And it's funny, I actually just did a post that I was like, one of my pet peeves is people who lead with like, I coach people to get 6 figures and 7 figures. I don't know. I just feel so weird about that. Um, no. Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to say about that is that the people who are making $1 million, like that's amazing. Do you have these systems in place and your value systems aligned to really utilize that money properly? Because if not, it's going to be a constant rat race. That $1 million doesn't mean anything if you don't have systems in place for knowing how to use it properly so that you're not just burning through it to get that next high and then getting on the rat race again. So it's really about, yeah, building out your life. I like to go a little bit slower, but your question, yeah, I had a client who was really focused on money results. And so we spent a lot of the coaching program on business strategies because I can do that. And I offer that a little bit, but I wasn't prepared to do it to the extent of a business coach because I don't consider myself a business coach. Business strategy is one aspect of what we do for the purpose of setting up the resources that you need to be a good leader. And this person coming to me already in scarcity, needing to make money for certain things. I ended up taking that on because my energy is really sensitive and I was in scarcity for 4 days. And I had to realize that this wasn't mine. So I don't know if anybody follows human design, but I'm a human design reflector. And they say that this could be one aspect is like you take on the energies that are around you if you're not careful. So I ended up taking on that client intuitively knowing that it wasn't value aligned, but I knew in my heart that I would most definitely be able to make a difference, and just making her life a little bit better. I knew that she would be able to lead her community better, and that's all that mattered. So we had to come in a little bit of a mutual agreement, my thinking mind and my knowing mind. We had to come to an agreement. So it was still great that I took her. She was wonderful, but life learnings for the next one, that it's like, by the way, this isn't something where we're profit driven, although that is something that will come in.
Yeah.
It's just not the goal.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like those things are so, like, as you can see, like I have a vision board behind me, and over the years it's gotten much different. And, I, at one point on my vision board, I had like 83.3K, because I think anybody who start a business, you know exactly too. Like, we know what we need to make a month to hit that $1 million mark. And like all of these different things were like, cool, these are like material goals and stuff. But then, like, it's funny, you put those goals up and you don't notice when they're accomplished, which is obviously a blessing. But that never brought any happiness. What actually brought more happiness, to the point of what you're teaching, is like creating more time for my wife and I, or, learning that maybe I should go to a pickup basketball game or something like that.
Right.
And so when you work with an entrepreneur and you do like I don't know if this is involved in your mind mapping or anything like that, but you kind of do an assessment of what their values and goals are. What are some of the roads that you show them to create values that will actually bring fulfillment and bring joy, as opposed to like checking something off of a box, or is more of like a status goal, I guess you could say?
Yeah. We do a few things there, different assessments, but overall quality of life, balance assessment, priorities, where they're prioritizing their four energetic currencies. I'm a professional planner, so we do specific goal setting. But before we ever set the $88,000 goal, it's like, actually, what's behind that? Because money is just freedom. It's an energy that's going to give us freedom. So what kind of freedom are you looking for? And if they have a goal, really get why, and asking it a few times, but why though? Like, what is the actual driver? Because if it's not in alignment, it's going to be a much harder goal to reach, because you're not doing it from a place of authenticity. So one system would be actually setting up goals. Another one would be removing out any energy blocks that are keeping them from getting there. And in the mind mapping, we do dive deeper into what they're actually trying to achieve. And it's rapid fire questions. So I think more comes out than they expect, but it shows them like, oh my gosh, I didn't think that was why. I'm like, yeah.
In your journey, going from working in corporate to now working with other businesses and other entrepreneurs, what has been the most, fulfilling aspect of it for you?
Really getting to feel what it means to be in balance, and then to be able to share that with other people. And the reason I am able to do that is because I have time freedom. Like one of my biggest things of abundance is that I don't wake up with an alarm clock. And, I wake up naturally about 7:30, but I love the idea that my circadian rhythm is aligned and it's going to tell me when I should wake up. So that is how I quantify my abundance. But being able to have that autonomy. The other thing is I'm a creative at heart. So I love being creative with my business expression and playing around with different concepts of what I'm here to offer and who I'm here to work with, and the never ending mystery. I think something new gets revealed every single week. And I'm like, oh, I kind of joke because I feel like my business is a baby in a sense of not having an actual physical baby. But, you have your toddler years where you have to really be there because they can't walk and whatnot. And so you're just helping them out. And then they get to the years, or their infant years, and then they get to their toddler years and they're running around and you're like, oh, what are you going to do next? What are you going to say next? And then you have a full blown teenager who's just, the business is flowing on its own and you can kind of step away and start a new business. But
that's a nice way to look at it, because I might be in my teenage years and for our business, and it's like sometimes I feel like it's giving me attitude, staying up all night. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
As an entrepreneur, you have to wear a lot of hats, and for me personally, like I love the fact that I get to come to an incredible team. I want to, and we get to like create spaces to improve each other's lives professionally and personally. But I don't love every aspect of my business. Anything that has to do with spreadsheet, for example, accounting, any of that. And luckily we put systems in place there. But I would love to know from you for your own business, like what is the one thing within your business that brings you the most joy? What is that task or that thing that you do every day? It's like, all right, I get to do this thing and I love doing that.
Yeah, it's this. It's this. Yeah. Having organic, connected conversations with people that I share values with lights me up so much. And that's kind of how I've structured my business. There's so many things I love in my business, but I started a podcast because one of the best ways that you can find success, sustainable success, is to do something you would do for free. So with my podcast, I'm not laser focused on like, why isn't this getting this? Or I'm not outcome driven. I'm not pushing my podcast to perform. I'm just letting it flow and I'm allowing it to be. And I am witnessing so many beautiful connections that come in because of this connectedness. But I was basically just getting on networking calls and chatting through some of this stuff anyways. And now I just press record. So that would be what's lighting me up the most right now.
I love hearing that. And, we were talking before that, we're pretty aligned in that respect because I like doing this. I don't know if it's part of my job, but I've convinced my controller that it is anyway.
Good. Amazing.
Speaking of your podcast, before I ask the last question of today, if somebody wants to connect with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, please connect with me. I'd love to meet you. I'm really big into synchronicities. So even the way that you found me, I'm like, oh, that feels so aligned. So if you're called, if you're magnetized, I would love to meet you, and you can connect with me probably on Instagram. So Ellie_BT. It's really simple and easy. And then it also has my website if you want to learn more. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. You're in Austin, Texas, right?
Yes.
Great. Last question of the day then. Austin, Texas is known as the live music capital of the world. Where is the best place to catch some live music in Austin?
Ooh, best place. I am probably not the right person to ask for that. I'm not good with remembering names of places. So that's probably not the best question to end this podcast on.
We can always change that one out, which is perfectly fine.
Give me an easier one.
Do you like Tex-Mex? Is Tex-Mex a thing there?
Tex-Mex is huge. Have you been to Austin?
I've been to Dallas, and I guess I was supposed to try Tex-Mex, but I didn't. Have you been to California?
So I'm from California.
Okay.
I'm from California. Yeah.
I got the question.
Okay.
And sorry to cut you off before I lose it.
Okay.
Nick, when you're going through this, we can just cut that last question.
Yeah.
All right. Last question of the day. You're from California and you live in Austin, Texas now. In-N-Out or Whataburger?
In-N-Out, 100%. I'm dedicated to that to the point where I haven't even had Whataburger because I'm like my loyalty is to In-N-Out.
I love that. That makes me so happy. And I did try Whataburger when I was there, and everybody was like, you got to try it. You got to try it. And I got to say, like, it was not anything. It was like a Burger King burger. Like, you know what I mean? Sorry.
I was thinking the same thing. I saw it and I was like, it looks like Burger King, and Burger King is like out of business, I think.
I love that. Hey, well, thank you so much for your time, for your energy. Honestly, like you shared so much with us, and probably more than you were expecting from the business standpoint. And I truly appreciate it. I'm sure the listeners do too. And to the listeners, thank you so much for your time and attention. We really appreciate that. If you love the episode, we would dig a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it that much, feel free to stick it to us, but subscribe anyway, because we're going to have a ton of incredible people just like Ellen back on the show. Thanks again.
Thank you.